My name is Irene Miguel-Aliaga, and I'm Professor of Genetics and Physiology at Imperial College and Section Chair at the MRC London Institute of Medical Sciences. Welcome to my exp. I think historically we had a very top-down view of sort of intelligence, if you like, when you regard it from a sort of from the perspective of how we make decisions, or how we know, how we sense, how we integrate, how we that leads to behavioural adaptations, right, or physiological adaptations. So we kind of thought, well, you know, there's this very clever brain that's getting information from our environment, and that leads to changes, physiological changes, and some of those will involve the intestine, right? So the brain will tell the intestine to do things. But the fact is, we've also known now for kind of centuries almost that when you look at the nerves that connect the brain with the gut, most of the information goes from the gut to the brain, right? So 70% of the fibers are of the sort of connections between the two will go from the gut to the brain. So that almost tells you anatomically that there has to be very extensive crosstalk, and maybe there's more going from the gut to the brain than from the brain to the gut. And this makes sense if you think that this integration and this kind of decision making needs to consider not only external information, but also internal information. And where is this internal information going to come from? The gastrointestinal tract is a good place, right? Because the gastrointestinal tract is exposed to nutrients, is exposed to microbiota, is exposed to potentially the stuff that's circulating in our bloodstream, right? So I think it's a good place to make decisions, or at least decisions about our internal state. So then say that the gut cells will be exposed to this complex information. So it may be what we've eaten or what we haven't eaten, the kind of the activity of the bugs within our intestine. What are they up to? What are they sort of metabolizing? What are they transforming? And then also things such as our internal state, for example, at the level of reproduction, right? I think historically, for example, as far as the gastrointestinal tract is concerned, we tended to think of it as in the context of food intake, for example, right? So we tended to think it was the gut was stopping us, right? So, oh, we've eaten too much, you know, we're full, you know, we don't feel well, we just stop eating. And we thought that the gut was sensing these signals back to the brain, which it does. But we thought that was the only role. And this is not just our research, but what we're learning now as a community is that pleasant signals can also come from the gastrointestinal tract. So signals that may ask us to eat more, actually, for example, of something that is nutritious. And they can even kind of make us happy, right? So it's not just about the gut telling us to stop eating because we've eaten too much and we don't feel well. It can also send us reward signals. It can send reward signals back to the reward centers in the brain, and that can actually stimulate further eating. So it's complex and it's interesting, and we still know very little about it. Our entry point into all this was actually fruit flies, so Drosophila. And the reason for that was that the gastrointestinal tract, so the digestive system, is relatively complex, but they're a much simpler system to work with. So they have also nerve cells in their gut, but we can actually map or sort of characterize all these different cells and learn what each cell does. So that's what we've been doing over the years, and And we realized that actually they do pretty interesting stuff. So for example, we've learned that there's a particular subset of these nerve cells that learns actually that the female fly is reproducing. So these nerve cells are normally quiet, so they're not firing, they're not doing anything, they're just there in males and in females. And then when the fly reproduces, so when the fly has so-called mated and it begins to make loads of eggs, these cells the nerve cells are sort of awakened by reproduction, and that makes them begin to fire. And this firing changes how a stomach-like organ in the fly intestine contracts. And this in turn regulates food intake, increases food intake actually. So what we think is happening is that these neurons relay this reproductive information through the digestive system, through the nervous system, so that the female fly increases food intake during reproduction.